Good to be with you. I'm Tony DeCopel right now. Nicolas Maduro, the deposed Venezuelan dictator, is in a federal lockup in New York City after a late-night appearance before cameras, walking in sandals and wishing onlookers a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Tonight, our first images of Maduro's wife as well, who's behind bars in the same building where crowds gathered chanting, "Down with the dictator." What the White House is promising tonight about his trial. Also breaking tonight, more on the raid that got him, the CIA on the ground for months, what they saw, what U.S. cyber warriors did to turn out the lights in Caracas, and reaction coming in from Congress, what Democrats are saying about the strike. Our Charlie D'Agata is standing by.
Make Venezuela great again. Very simple.
And the other developing story, who's running Venezuela now? As many there fear the worst may be yet to come.
Is there an agreement to transition to democracy? It sounds like there's not.
What Marco Rubio told our Margaret Brennan today about why Maduro's deputies are still in power.
Everyone's asking why 24 hours after Nicolas Maduro was arrested, there isn't an election scheduled for tomorrow? That's absurd.
This is a special edition of the CBS Evening News with Tony DeCopel.
Good evening. We're back in New York tonight, back on the story that shook the world this weekend, the sudden U.S. raid on Nicolas Maduro. Delta Force commandos snatched the Venezuelan dictator and his wife from a fortified compound in Caracas on Saturday. And now they are both here in New York City tonight in a notorious federal detention facility. Charlie D'Agata is standing by in West Palm Beach with more on the raid and what critics of the president are saying about it. But we're going to begin by welcoming Matt Gutman to CBS News. He is live outside the Brooklyn jail holding Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. And this is a moment for you, Matt. Good evening. Almost a decade ago, I want to let our viewers know you and the producer you are standing with now in Brooklyn were held together by the Maduro regime in prison in Venezuela. Quite a full circle moment. Excited to have you here. Good evening.
Thanks, Tony. It is good to be with you. And yes, quite a full circle. Unexpected, to say the least. Now, you mentioned Maduro's arraignment. It is set for noon tomorrow, and he faces a slew of federal charges, including for narco-terrorism, which, if convicted, could net him decades in prison.
Less than 18 hours after that fiery early morning capture in Caracas, Nicolas Maduro and his wife spent their first night in U.S. lockup at the Metropolitan Detention Center in New York City. Maduro and his wife Celia Flores being held on multiple federal charges, the pair touching down Saturday afternoon on a government jet just north of New York City. Dozens of federal officials there on the ground, many of them taking advantage of the photo op. The couple were then choppered to the DEA headquarters in New York City, where they were booked and fingerprinted. And again, Maduro was paraded by agents, this time offering them a cordial greeting.
Good night. Happy New Year.
And finally, this motorcade ferrying them to their last stop back here at the Metropolitan Detention Center.
The MDC is a far cry from Maduro's palace in Caracas. Now, law enforcement sources tell us that he is being held in one of the top floors of this jail. They say that he is not being held in isolation, but is being held with other higher profile inmates.
The federal jail facility is notorious for poor conditions and the infamous inmates it has housed, including accused murderer Luigi Mangione, Sean Diddy Combs, and Epstein co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell.
Judges in New York have been very critical of this MDC prison.
David Marcus was Maxwell's attorney, and he describes conditions inside as barbaric.
What's it like inside?
If we saw an American being held in a prison like this in Venezuela, we would yell and scream and say it's a human rights violation. They keep it frigid in there. The food is not fit for human consumption.
Caroline Polisi is a criminal defense attorney and says tomorrow's arraignment starts the clock for prosecutors to turn over evidence.
Do you think that Maduro can get a fair trial in the United States?
Absolutely. The prosecution wants to make sure every element of this trial is not prejudicial. They, just as much as the defense, want this case to be fair and impartial.
Now, while there is some question about the strength of the government's evidence against Maduro, what seems not to be in question among the legal analysts that we talk to is whether he can get a fair trial in the U.S. Tony.
Matt, thank you very much. Great to have you here. Also tonight, we know more about the U.S. raid that took down Nicolas Maduro, a raid that Democrats back in Washington are claiming was illegal. Charlie D'Agata is traveling with the president. He's in West Palm Beach for us again tonight. Charlie?
Good evening, Tony. We're learning tonight that the Venezuelan military has formally recognized this interim government, and that is an important step forward, while also condemning the U.S. military for killing Maduro's security team, in their words, in cold blood.
As day broke in Caracas, the people of Venezuela awoke to an uncertain future, with smoke rising and the remains of the Maduro regime still on display. The quiet streets reflected uncertainty about who was in charge after President Trump said the U.S. would run Venezuela until elections are held. His Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, told Face the Nation's Margaret Brennan that military assets in the region remain poised for more action and that the oil quarantine will continue.
That remains in place. And that's a tremendous amount of leverage that will continue to be in place until we see changes that not just further the national interest of the United States, which is number one, but also that lead to a better future for the people of Venezuela.
The Trump administration is counting on Maduro's former deputy, Delcy Rodriguez, now sworn in as the new president, to do what they tell her, and she was put on notice today in an interview Trump gave The Atlantic magazine. If she doesn't do what's right, Trump said, she's going to pay a very big price, probably bigger than Maduro. Rodriguez has so far condemned the U.S. raid and insisted that Maduro, seen in custody in New York, is the legitimate leader of Venezuela. Democrats in Washington, including Congressman Jim Himes, slammed the operation as illegal and faulted the administration for failing to notify Congress in advance.
No Democrat that I'm aware of has had any outreach whatsoever. So apparently we're now in a world where the legal obligation to keep the Congress informed only applies to your party, which is really something.
We're learning more about the operation spearheaded by Delta Force commandos. The New York Times reporting today as many as 80 Venezuelans were killed, including most of Maduro's personal security team.
There was a lot of opposition. There was a lot of gunfight.
Several U.S. troops suffered injuries in the firefights, none life-threatening.
Secretary Rubio says that the administration did not need to inform Congress about this raid because it was a law enforcement operation and not a military invasion.
Charlie D'Agata for us. Charlie, thank you very much. Also today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke to our Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation about what comes next in Venezuela, including the fate of Maduro's top deputies who are still in place.
I'm curious because you just described the regime as still in place, essentially. I mean, I'm curious why the Trump administration decided to leave it intact and only arrest Nicolas Maduro and his wife, the person who controls the police, the chief thug, Diaz-Cabello. He's the interior minister. He's been indicted by the United States. He was in that indictment the administration released. He's a narco-terrorist. There's a $25 million price on his head. He's still in place. The defense minister, who has deep ties to Russia, $15 million price on his head. He is still in place. I'm confused. Are they still wanted by the United States? Why didn't you arrest them if you are taking out the narco-terrorist regime?
You're confused? I don't know why that's confusing to you.
They're still in power.
It's very simple. You're not going to go in and wrap up. But you can't go. You're going to go in and suck up 5 people. They're already complaining about this one operation. Imagine the howls we would have from everybody else if we actually had to go and stay there 4 days to capture 4 other people. We got the top priority. The number one person on the list was the guy who claimed to be the president of the country that he was not, and he was arrested along with his wife, who was also indicted. And that was a pretty sophisticated and frankly complicated operation.
You can see Margaret's full interview with Secretary of State Marco Rubio on CBSNews.com. Many Venezuelans living outside their home country have been celebrating Maduro's capture, including in the Miami suburb of Doral, where roughly half the population is of Venezuelan descent. Christian Benavides is there for us tonight, where there is new hope for their home country and for seeing their loved ones once again. Christian, good evening.
Tony, good evening. It's been an around-the-clock celebration for so many Venezuelans who gathered by the hundreds outside this Venezuelan restaurant here in Doral, Florida, since yesterday, and they're back here again tonight.
Celebrations marking the end of Nicolas Maduro's rule erupted throughout the weekend, notably in South Florida. It's home to 500,000 Venezuelans. We met 25-year-old Christopher Moreno. He and his family arrived in the U.S. in 2016, fleeing the Maduro regime.
It's just a feeling, I can't explain it. We make a life here because we had to, not because we wanted to. So we really want to go back.
He is one of roughly 8 million Venezuelans, more than a quarter of the country's population, who fled the troubled country in the last decade, the largest exodus in Latin America's modern history. While the exiled community celebrated Maduro's ouster, a different scene in Caracas, where there's tense anticipation and uncertainty and a rush for basics, including food and medicine.
Tiempos difíciles.
Hard times are coming, this woman says, but I hope it will bring significant change to Venezuela. Today at the Vatican, Pope Leo XIV criticized U.S. intervention. He's not alone. There were protests around the world, including in the U.S.
We know that these wars cost billions of dollars, and that is money that could be used to help the working class in the United States.
But for so many Venezuelans, this is a moment they've waited for over 25 years of hardline rule.
I think we deserve having freedom. We're good people.
It is difficult to overstate the joy and the hope that is being felt here by so many Venezuelans that the toppling of Nicolas Maduro could mean the return of freedom and democracy to Venezuela. Tony?
Christian, I think you captured it beautifully. Thank you very much. Still ahead on the CBS Evening News, he led U.S. soldiers in wartime battling the Taliban in Afghanistan and capturing Saddam Hussein in Iraq. What retired Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster says about President Trump's decision to depose Maduro and what he thinks should happen next. We're back, and what happens next now in Venezuela after the U.S. capture of dictator Nicolas Maduro and President Trump's plans to run the country is a big question on many people's minds. To address it and more, we're joined by exactly the right person, retired Army Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, who, of course, served as National Security Advisor in the first Trump administration. Good evening, Lieutenant General. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, great to be with you, Tony. Thanks for having me.
So, General, one way to look at what happened in the last 48 hours in Venezuela is the U.S. toppled the dictator but left the dictatorship in place. Maduro's lieutenants are all still running the country. If you're Venezuelan right now, how is that a new birth of freedom? What was the point of all this?
Well, I think the point was to bring him to justice and to take this, what is a very complicated first step to replacing the Maduro regime with a legitimate regime. You got to remember, this guy, stole the election blatantly. I mean, it was obvious to everybody that 70% plus of Venezuelans had voted that guy out of office, and he's had this devastating effect on the country. So you're right, Tony, this is just the first step in what's going to be, I think, increasing pressure on the regime, mainly focused on drying up their cash flow.
But, General, you've, of course, been here before with the toppling of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, also toppling of the Taliban in Afghanistan. Those are not exactly reassuring case studies of where this goes from here. If you were advising the president, what would you tell him to do today?
Well, I think what we have to do is look at the unique circumstances of Venezuela. It's not Iraq. It's not Afghanistan. Tony, we've been through this before. I think the problem in both those wars was that we took a short-term approach to a long-term problem set in both places. The Venezuelans ultimately have to do this themselves. But of course, what Maduro's been very good at is crushing any opposition by throwing people into jail, torturing them, murdering them, and then making kind of these brigades of kind of almost like brown shirts, to be his enforcers.
It sounds like your recommendation to this government, if you were still a part of it, would be to go all the way. Regime change is coming. It is necessary, and you should hand Venezuela back to the Venezuelan people.
Well, it would be to isolate him from sources of strength and support, including the cash flow. That's what you see with the interdiction of the oil tankers and the destruction of the boats, cutting off his access to the narcotics funds. And then, of course, there are many Venezuelans who are ready to come back and rebuild the country. Remember, there are 8 million Venezuelans have fled the country. These are really talented, resourceful people who are ready to go back and reclaim their country.
Yep, General, I hear you. It sounds like President Donald Trump's going to have to call you and hire you back in order to get your frankest recommendation this evening. I think I know where you're going with all this, though. I appreciate you shedding light on it for our viewers. Thank you very much, Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster.
Next time.
Still ahead on the CBS Evening News, ripple effects, how the American military operation in Venezuela is impacting U.S. air travel. Tonight, U.S. airlines are flying again in and out of the Caribbean, but the surprise U.S. attack on Venezuela prompted the FAA to close the airspace over much of the area on Saturday. And Chris Van Cleve reports many stranded Americans are still waiting for their flights home.
With the airspace closed, we heard from many travelers who feared they wouldn't be able to get out of the Caribbean for up to a week. The airlines have ramped up service, added flights, using bigger airplanes to try to get as many people home as fast as possible.
The Crane family was wrapping up their holiday vacation with a flight home to New York Saturday, but that flight was among the more than 1,100 canceled after the FAA closed the airspace over much of the Caribbean. The day-long closure impacted more than a dozen airports, including those in Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Aruba.
I'm a teacher. I'm supposed to go back to work tomorrow.
This family of 5 is still in Puerto Rico and won't all be home until late Wednesday night.
We've continued to search frantically to try to get something. We found a flight for our eldest daughter, who's 18. We found a flight for her Tuesday so she can go home a day earlier.
How frustrating is this?
Oh, it's quite
Very frustrated.
This was the scene at the San Juan airport Saturday. About 400 flights in and out of that airport alone were canceled. American Airlines says it added 5,000 additional seats across nearly 24 extra flights Sunday. Southwest added more than a dozen flights through Monday. Newlywed Christine Moore got stuck at the Philadelphia airport after her flight to Barbados was grounded Saturday.
This weekend of all weekends for my honeymoon to be canceled.
Actor Leonardo DiCaprio was supposed to be accepting an award at the Palm Springs Film Festival this weekend, but he reportedly couldn't get out of St. Bart's.
I'm sorry I couldn't be there tonight. I'm stuck on the East Coast. I wish I was there to celebrate with all of you.
For the Crane family, it'll mean several days of missed work and school.
If I could get a U-Haul and pretend to be a goat and get on a cargo plane, I would do it.
Whatever expenses they accrue during these unplanned extended stays are likely coming out of the traveler's pocket because the closure was the action of the government, not the airlines. It's not the airline's responsibility to compensate flyers.
So often it isn't. Chris Van Cleve, thank you very much. Next on the CBS Evening News, a final look at all that's at stake in Venezuela. We're back tonight with President Trump's decision to remove the dictator in Venezuela, but appearing for now to leave the dictatorship in place, and all that's at stake in that call. Maduro's deputies, including his vice president, who is now interim president, have publicly rejected the idea of following America's orders for the country and have demanded Maduro's return. The White House, though, is having none of it. Late today, President Trump told The Atlantic that if interim President Delcy Rodriguez doesn't listen, there is a, quote, very big price to pay. In the balance, there is so much here: the lives of tens of millions of Venezuelans, the stability of the hemisphere, and the role America wants to play in this still young century. So as we close out tonight, amid what is still the largest U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean in more than 50 years, we are thinking of America's soldiers and sailors, each and every one of them, as they stand ready for whatever comes next. For now, that's another day in America and the world. I'm Tony DeCopel. And a reminder for our viewers, join us for our Live from America tour coming later this week on the CBS Evening News. Good night.